Clicking the button. Welcome, everyone, to episode 27 of Maker That Money, the podcast where we talk about taking your hobby to your jobby, making your hobby your jobby. I don't know. I got to work on that a little bit more. But I am Pooch of Repkord. It's my small business. And with me, as always, my co-host, Mr. Andrew Mayhall from 3D Gloop. Mr. Mayhall, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, Mr. Mayhall now, eh?
Well, I always like to switch it up.
I love it. I
How
love it.
how was your week? I mean, here we are again, another Friday, just
I
flying
can't
by,
believe
just
it's Friday.
flying by, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
This week's been pretty good. Busy as always, but overall, lots of great things in the pipeline. So,
that's awesome. And greetings to everybody joining us on YouTube in the chat this morning. For those that are listening back to the podcast after, we do this every Friday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific. Feel free to join us if you want to feed us questions, commentary, insults, whatever from the chat. You're certainly welcome to do that. We also have right above us here the Maker That Money hotline. So if you want to call in and join the conversation, you're more than welcome to do so. We can accommodate that. We have the technology. And today on the pod, we are going to talk about some tales from the trenches, right? We've kind of touched on this
oh boy.
before, talking about some customer service stories, looking at the perspective from the business side of things, because obviously we are all customers as well, and we have our perceptions, our ideas about what a company
Mm-hmm.
should do to offer good customer service.
Yep.
But obviously, we don't really get to hear the flip side as much. And what I'm hoping to is for this not to become a bitch fest necessarily, but just so that we have some learning, some teachings from it. I know I've been talking to people on Twitter and stuff ahead of time. If you've got some horror stories or whatever that you want to share, we can talk about it. Feel free to call in, and then in the chat we can discuss. Maybe what would you have done? How would you approach it? But it's often different from this side of the customer service experience because,
Absolutely.
obviously when you're starting as a small business and all this stuff, there are certain expectations put on you as the business to basically be the bigger man, and I
Mm-hmm.
mean be the bigger person, right?
Yep.
Whatever your pronoun wants to be, and that's really hard, obviously, when it's not necessarily your fault that something goes wrong, but you kind of have to, take it on the chin in the name of customer service oftentimes. So we'll dive into that and all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And then I want to talk a little bit too about growing a thicker skin and how hard that is, because as much as we'd love to be able to not take everything personally, it is very
Mm-hmm.
personal, as you well
Oh,
know.
it,
That
it is very, very personal sometimes.
oftentimes we get these requests where it feels like somebody is coming to your office and just basically telling you, you're doing a terrible job and you don't deserve to
Yep.
be paid what you're paid, and perceptions of who you are and who your company is often
Mm-hmm.
um, off, right? Because I think we have these luxuries in this day and age that anyone can present themselves as a much larger entity than they often are, because we have like these great looking websites, and the customer doesn't have
Mm-hmm.
context whether you're a company of one or a company of 100 oftentimes,
Yep.
right? And so a lot of the tricks of the trade are kind of setting that tone properly, like making sure people have that understanding and all that. So we'll get into all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But before we do, I want to give you the chance. We try to do this every week, because I know there's a tendency to talk about all the challenges and the negativity, but we like to share wins, right? So that's kind
Oh
of a
yes.
regular segment and stuff like that. So I like to put Andrew on the spot and have him just brighten up the room for us with just something good that happened. And it can be anything, but we just we want to set that tone correctly. And
Sure.
you guys, if you're in the chat following us, tell us something awesome that happened to you this week as well. We want to hear the awesome as well.
Yes. Yes.
What do you have for us, Andrew?
Well, this week has been full of surprises. Lots of some good ones, some okay ones, but I think a really good win right now is that we are now in track chasing after some really awesome grant opportunities.
Ooh.
For researching some new advances in some of the adhesive and polymer space that we've been working on internally. So this is kind of our skunk works, if you will.
Ooh,
But
the 3D Gloop Skunk
yeah,
Works. That sounds amazing.
yeah, yeah. So good news there. We are full steam ahead, and maybe here in the next couple of months, we can announce some really big news.
That's really interesting because I'll admit I don't know the first thing about grant writing and grants and stuff that are out there, but obviously that's a huge opportunity to get
Hmm.
funding from the government and stuff. And so we'll have to make sure we touch on this more in the future once you've kind of been through the process and have some more to
Yep.
share on that front because that sounds really interesting to me. Can you talk a little bit more or tease a little bit more about like what the grant program is and what kind of money we're talking
Sure.
about?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a National Science Foundation Small Business Innovation Research Grants. These are offered to companies that submit a project pitch about a specific technology or topic that they are researching and want to continue researching. And the government, specifically National Science Foundation, really kind of puts into these projects, and they will fund research and development. So, um, you know, there's a lot of hoops to jump through.
I'd imagine.
But yeah, but it's really cool. So, for certain things, it makes sense. For other things, it's like, okay, well, you should probably just fund that with the business profits. So, we'll see what ends up happening, but lots of really cool stuff.
Well, that's exciting. We'll have to follow up more on that on a future episode. Cool. Thank you for sharing that. A couple of wins
Hmm.
from the chat this morning. Mayhall Tech shares he built a new photo booth that's
Hmm.
able to stop his product photo bottleneck. That's huge. Um,
Nice.
I
Yeah.
still it's funny
I
he
need one of
mentions that.
those.
I know. I could use that because it always takes a lot more time to do product photos and stuff than we talk about. We should that's another great, talking about collateral and marketing stuff. That's another great topic idea for a
Oh,
future
yes.
thing. I've got my little hacks and stuff that I do, but that's fantastic. So Mahal, congrats on that. He said the photos were taking forever, and now he's able to do them daily and stuff. A lot of times, those little things, right, make all the
Hmm.
difference because it takes away not just the amount of time that it takes, but that psychological barrier that we're
Oh,
always up
yes.
against, right? Where we're just like, oh, I hate taking product photos, and I'm just gonna put it off and not do it. But you would attack the problem, and you realize usually
Hmm.
one, it's not nearly as bad as you think, and two, you know,
I was
you're
gonna say.
you're saving that time. Sorry, by all means, jump in. Yeah,
I was gonna say, like, it's for me, it's never as bad as I think it is. I get inside my own head, it's like, oh, I don't want to do this, and
same,
I
same,
psych
same.
myself out of doing it when it's like, but no, you're absolutely right. Having
Different,
that,
but same. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
No, that's a great win. I love that. And let's see. Fish FPV says he's got some big printing orders this week. That's fantastic. Good, growing your
awesome.
business. That's fantastic to hear. I'll have to give us some more details on what you're printing and what kind of prints you do. 3D printing. CRS1 Chris, he's been parting out and selling a dumpster lathe. I'm not familiar with a dumpster lathe for the last few weeks. South Bend from the University Scrap Bin. Maybe he just means it's just he found it in a dumpster and he's
I think that's what
making
that
some
means.
money from it. That sounds awesome. Great. Great. And Alex is with us from the UK. Good to see you, my friend. Back from holiday, all the customer orders went perfectly. First time, spent a whole extra day of organizing the new office. Looks super tidy and deep cleaned too. That's fantastic. We've talked about organization a little bit in the past when we
Hmm.
had Courtney on. I can't stress how important that is psychologically to our well-being as well, right? Just
Yep.
how much more effective and energized you are to work when you're in a space that just doesn't feel like a dumpster that you might find a lathe
Yep.
in or something. So listen, guys, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing your wins with us. That's good. And I think I'll share a quick one, as small and as simple as it sounds. One of my psychological barriers is like coming up with product labeling and documentation and all that stuff is always just like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I don't want to do it, but it's got to be done. And we're constantly revising packaging and stuff like that. And historically, I've been the
Mm-hmm.
only one that has like the software and the digital chops, I
Yeah.
guess, to make these mods. But it occurred to me yesterday. I said, you know what? Like, I'm being too fancy with this. We've talked before about minimum viable product, and so I was trying to take our
Yep.
own teachings by the thing. And so I dialed it back and said, what tools are available to me right now that could be used by anybody just to get the label done, right? Like, because we can always
Mm-hmm.
make it prettier later, but the end
Oh
user
yeah.
generally doesn't care, if it's got
Mm-hmm.
nice graphic designs. They just need to know what's in the bag and all that stuff. And so we use and we should talk about tool sets and stuff in a future one as well. But we use
Oh
Google
yes.
Google for Business, Google Drive, the whole Google suite. And I know a lot of people have opinions about using cloud services and stuff for business.
Sure.
I know I see. I'm looking at you, Lefteris, in X3D, and he has his opinions about the cloud services out there. But we leverage that tool very heavily,
Mm-hmm.
and it is a critical infrastructure for us because I'm constantly, I'm working from the home office. I'm there, like having access to all the files and making them portable between users is key. And so we've got a good setup there. But there's a very simple, and you guys have probably seen it, and you're gonna be like, duh. There's a Google Drawings thing, just like there's Google Sheets and Google Docs and whatever. And it's a stupid simple web based program that's or it's not even a program, it's a platform that's basically
Yeah.
perfect for just setting up the dimensions you want. You can import some photos if you need to, just put a bulleted list
Oh.
together and we can print directly to our label printer from there. Easy peasy. And it just took a lot of that weight off because I was like, hey, if my guy out in the shop notices like, oh, you know what, we actually need to put 10 screws in here, not 8, because people are losing them, or sometimes they're questionable coming from the factory. He can literally just go onto the Google Drive, open up the thing, change 8 to 10, bing bang boom, done. Not bottlenecked by me. So I'm gonna call that a win.
That's awesome. That's
Pat myself
great.
on the back for that. So it's just the little things sometimes, guys.
Yeah.
We've also new announcements coming up, but we've signed up some new resellers that I'm super excited about.
That's
That's a
awesome.
huge win. And we're charging forward on some new product. I mean, I got so many irons in the fire, too many irons in the fire, oftentimes, but
Tell me
lots
about it.
lots of good stuff happening, which is good. Um, all right, Andrew, are you ready to dive in on some
Let's do
tales
this.
tales from the trenches? So, would you like to start us off with maybe a customer service story that was a challenge? Let's just put it this way: it was a challenge,
Okay.
and then how you
Sure.
addressed it and what you learned from it.
Sure. Well, we at Gloop, we have a lot of little issues pop up sometimes when it comes to our products. Mainly as it comes to shipping the darn stuff to get it places. Oftentimes we find the postal carrier, whatever it might be, end up losing the package, or somehow, it gets damaged in shipping. All sorts of frustrating things can happen. I couldn't tell you how many crazy scenarios we've ended up with. But one thing that comes to mind that was a really difficult, kind of situation to deal with was actually pretty recently. We had a customer order a couple months ago a bottle of Gloop, and it was going up to our friends up north over in Canada. So we shipped the product and it disappeared.
It
Like it
disappeared.
never even existed. Yeah, disappeared.
What
And
may I ask? What shipping carrier?
we were using a USPS, so
Okay, okay,
yeah,
all right.
yeah. So you know, somehow it just disappeared, and we got a response saying it was delivered to Canada. The whole Canada. It was
Just
delivered to
delivered to
Canada.
Canada.
Which was very
Canada thanks
strange.
you for their delivery.
It was very strange. And so we were dealing with this was a little bit of a larger order. It wasn't huge, but yeah, we were dealing with trying to figure out what happened. And our insurance kicks in after 40 days. So we had to explain to this customer that, hey, unfortunately, we're going to have to wait 40 days before we can file a claim. And a lot of times, customers, they don't understand that, like, if we were just to ship a whole nother product, like, it's all coming out of us. And if there's an insurance, we have to follow these processes. If we don't, then we're potentially leaving the money on the table, not able to get anything back from it. So we had to convince this customers, like, okay, hey, it's we have to go through this process. That wasn't the best thing. But thankfully this particular person was a little bit more understanding after we explained the situation. So insurance eventually kicks in. They authorize us to ship another one. So we go ahead and ship another one. Unfortunately, it happens again.
Twice. Once bitten,
Twice.
twice shy. Oh my gosh. Twice bitten. Fool
and
me
and
once, fool
by
me
this
twice.
time, as you can imagine, the customer is irate. As a customer, like,
Wait a minute.
you
An
know
irate Canadian doesn't sound like an actual thing. Was
okay,
they were just less
they weren't super
apologetic?
irate.
Okay.
Yes, less, yes.
Yeah. All right.
But you could tell they were very upset, and
Sure.
I understand. And so as a business here, we have to weigh, okay, what could we do to help make the customer, like make this bad situation a little bit better, because this wasn't the fault of us, and it wasn't the fault of the customer. And here, the customer has been patiently waiting, for almost 2 months now. By the time, we reship the package, and they still don't have the product that they ordered. So how do we try and make this better?
What is this, like some remote part of Canada? Like, is it just like really, is it up in the Yukon
I'm
somewhere or
I'm
what?
not really sure. I didn't really look into it too much. I just know that
Okay.
it was very frustrating. And so we reach out, and we try and figure out, like, what went wrong. But ultimately, like, what we decided to do as the business is it made more sense to try and make this bad situation a little bit better for the customer. And so we ended up, on our own dollar, basically replace the product and ship using a different carrier that was considerably more expensive, to ensure that they got the product, just to try and help make this bad situation a little bit better. And then we basically went to our contacts at USPS, and we said, listen, this is ridiculous. You need to basically reimburse the cost of the shipping and the cost of the product now, instead of just
Mm.
offering to reship, because this is insane. And yeah.
It sounds to me like you might have like somebody along the chain with some sticky fingers like what? How does that happen? Like the odds of that happening twice are just so
Hmm.
monumentally small. And listen, guys,
Yeah.
I've used every courier service there is out there, and people are going to be like, "Oh, FedEx is the worst, USPS is the worst," and it depends on. First of all, there is no perfect courier. They all have their
Hmm.
problems. They
Yep.
all have their strengths in different regions and others, and just a lot of this is just learning, the game, depending on where you're going and stuff. Like I know for a fact that there's a lot of countries in Europe where you really don't want to use the postal service, because when it gets handed off, any local postal service, if you're shipping
Hmm.
USPS internationally, will get handed
Yep.
off to whatever the USPS equivalent is in that country generally. Sometimes there's some
Hmm.
exceptions where UPS or DHL or FedEx or whatever will take it the last bit of the way. It just depends on where you're going. But a
Yep.
lot of the times it's whatever the local equivalent is. And let me tell you, for as bad as we think our USPS is here, like for example, the Czech Republic was like, do not send stuff through that. Like they're terrible. Like they will just
Yeah.
they don't care. They'll just like let it sit in a corner, never deliver it, all that stuff. Like going through that
Yep.
service is not a great thing. So we as a company oftentimes have to make one, you have to learn, and two,
Hmm.
you make decisions on whether or not it's going to be worth it to spend a little bit more to potentially circumvent these problems in the future. And you just
Yep.
never know. Now, with a product like yours, Andrew, you it's a small thing.
Hmm. Yep.
Obviously, people are looking for the most economical way to get it there,
Mm.
and a lot of times
Yep.
the customer doesn't know themselves what
Yep.
the right thing. A lot of times they will. We've got plenty of Canadians here in the chat that will
Oh
chime in.
yes.
Taylor from
Hmm.
Neuro 3D, hey, shout out Taylor.
Hmm.
Uh um it says that it can be USPS, the equivalent, can be really a gamble in Canada
Hmm.
when it gets handed off to Canada Post, so their equivalent of
Sure.
USPS. I've had good luck. We've used USPS and Canada Post, but most people that we're shipping to Canada still take advantage of just using UPS. Well, I don't want to say take advantage because UPS to Canada has got its own fun stuff,
Yep.
mostly in the
Yep.
fees that they charge. It's not that the service is bad; it's just that they ream you on the charges. But
Yep.
anyway, um, there's challenges. Okay, so to to
Hmm.
wrap up this story,
Hmm.
customers irate. What did you learn from it? What do you feel like you
Yeah.
know
So
you're gonna
the
do in the
the
future?
biggest thing, yeah. So the biggest thing that ultimately I think that we took away from this entire situation, but we kind of take away from every situation, not just related to this specific incident, is understanding when there's no one at fault in the two parties that make the transactions work, and maybe it's not the customer's fault and it's not our fault. Outside situation comes in, causes an issue, and to try and make the customer happy is a good way to win some goodwill with that customer and potentially make them a lifetime customer where
Yeah,
they're going to keep coming back, they're going to keep ordering.
yeah,
And so that's where we as a company have to learn to kind of decipher and read between the lines, because it's not exact, and it just kind of happens, because we've had our fair share of other customers that have been horrible, and they have tried their best to come up with these crazy situations which aren't realistic, just to get an extra bottle of Gloop or something like that for free,
yeah.
claiming it's not in the package, and we have photos of every package that goes out showing that it is, and saying that
Were they saying the
like,
box was
oh,
empty when they opened it?
yeah,
I
yeah,
just got an
saying it
empty
wasn't
box.
delivered, and
Yeah,
we have a
yeah,
delivery receipt with yeah. So it's learning to try and read between the lines,
yeah,
and use some best judgment, but
yeah.
yeah, it's hard.
We'll talk about that a little bit more, like the package theft and
Hmm.
people that have less than savory intentions and stuff in a second. This is so you'll find if you guys are getting started in business and stuff like that. Let's pause for a second and first have an understanding of
Hmm.
what the responsibility of the
Hmm.
company is when you are shipping product. Okay? Because I think
Hmm.
a lot of customers are going to think like, until I physically have this, which is actually for the most part correct, like you're on the
Hmm.
hook for it. So
Yep.
why don't you explain to everybody here, as a business, what burden we have to take on when we're shipping stuff out there? What is the legal responsibility?
Hmm. Sure. So sometimes it really depends on the organization size. But let's say, for instance, we're talking about a small business that is using, let's say Etsy or Shopify or Squarespace, and they're selling through fulfillment, their fulfillment system, where that maybe they're shipping USPS, UPS, FedEx, etc. If a customer comes in and purchases your products, and they pay for the shipping, or whatever, you as the business are responsible for actually packaging that order, and then issuing a tracking number or tracking information to that customer,
Mm-hmm.
and then making for sure that you receive a delivery receipt. Now, granted, sometimes when you hand it off to a courier, it's out of your hands, you can't control things.
Right.
However, that customer can still, in many cases, file chargeback claims against the company
Yep.
if the product is never delivered to their actual address.
Yep.
So for instance, let's say, you collect the customer's information, they provide you an invalid shipping address,
Right.
and then you ship it to an invalid shipping address, and then it gets returned to you. We
Happens
had this
more than
happen.
you happens more than you'd like, guys. Trust me.
So
People fat finger
we've
addresses all the time.
yeah, so we as the company have fulfilled our obligation to ship it. However, what ends up happening is if it goes to a claim, we had this specifically happen where it went to a chargeback claim, and it's an uphill battle to prove that, hey, listen, the customer provided incorrect information. We shipped it. There was not a delivery thing. We had this notice. You have to provide all this documentation, and sometimes it's a little bit of a gamble on the chargeback claim, because sometimes it will go to the customer's favor, because whoever's reviewing it will say, well, you didn't actually deliver the product, which is frustrating. Now, most of the time we've had it where it's never been that issue. But we've had a specific issue where, when we've shipped something to a customer and USPS, for instance, didn't deliver to the proper address,
Yep.
we get a delivery receipt, and then they claim, well, I never got my package. So
Yep.
who's at fault?
Yep.
Like, we shipped the package, we had the tracking information, USPS scanned it in.
And the finger pointing begins, and it happens.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh,
And
does that suck a lot of time and energy from your
it
day?
yes, it's incredibly frustrating. So, in this example, who's responsible is actually USPS. And what would end up happening is the customer could still file a chargeback, and you can say that, hey, listen, this is the delivery receipt. A lot of times the chargeback will fail, so they'll side with the company. But now you have an incredibly unhappy customer. But in some
Right.
cases, and we had this happen, where the chargeback goes and succeeds, and it's because the package was delivered to an incorrect address. Then we had to go and fight the courier and say, listen, you have to provide the geolocation of when you scan the package. Most people don't recognize this, but when the USPS or UPS are scanning those packages, they have a geotag where it is.
Yes.
And it turns out, like in one case, the delivery guy delivered it like a block away.
Yeah.
And so, it was
Also
their
happens all the
fault.
time. Yeah. Yeah.
And so we end up having to, fight with them, and then their insurance kicks in, and then we end up getting reimbursed. But that's a process.
It is
And
a
as a
process,
business, as a company,
and the amount of
it takes a
time.
long time.
Tell
Mhm.
tell people how long that can take sometimes.
Yeah, so we had one last about 60 days, I think, and
Yeah.
that's still a relatively short one.
That's actually,
I've
yeah, I was
heard
gonna
some
say that's
horror
kind of short.
stories
Yeah.
go 180 days, if not more.
Yeah.
Because there's so much process involved, and trying to figure out, okay, who's at fault, who's not at fault. But generally speaking, the rule of thumb that I like to follow is if the package does not get to the customer and we can show a delivery receipt, we are still on the hook.
Yeah.
And we have to figure out, how do we make this, how do we make this right. Most
Yeah.
customers will end up saying, well, okay, I understand it was stolen off my porch or whatever. But again, we have to be able to provide or prove, like, you know we actually delivered the package.
Yeah. So you guys, stop a second and imagine, put yourself in the company's shoes and think about this
Hmm.
for a second. You are in good faith, doing everything you can. You are reliant, though. No company has their own. Well, let's put Amazon aside, because even them, but whatever. You're not delivering your own packages, right? And so to some
Hmm.
extent, you have to be reliant on a third party. And we've talked
Hmm.
about this in the past too, like reliance on third party services for your business, and that's oftentimes where a lot of those devils in the details and liabilities lie, right? Because
Hmm.
they are the things that are outside of your control.
Yep.
But imagine for a second, you're starting up a company and you're hearing this and you go, wait a minute. It's on me if UPS or USPS or DHL or whatever like loses the thing before it gets to the customer. Well, fundamentally, we stop and think of that, and then it's like, well, it's not the customer's fault. It's not
Hmm.
the other person. So of course, the responsibility lies with the shipping service, but there's all kinds of stuff in terms of like how much they're going to be liable for. We haven't even started talking about insurance and stuff, because the
Yep.
default insurance rate for like insurance coverage for like UPS is $100. I think it's the same for
Yep.
USPS. And of course, you
Yep.
can buy additional insurance and stuff, but a lot of times that's not even offered as an option. So for something like Gloop or anything
Hmm.
under $100, you don't worry about that, right? But you
Nope.
start getting up
Hmm.
into the higher dollar things. Like we have stuff that's valued. We have shipments that's valued $5, $6, $7, $800, and nobody's going to be happy if they're only getting $100 back. That's not covering what's out there. So you can
Yeah.
imagine really quickly like how much of a liability this can be. And then on top of that, you start shipping internationally, and
Uh-huh.
those really high dollar shipping costs, and then
Hmm.
the extra kick in the giblets over the whole
Hmm.
thing is they fat finger, they put it in wrong, and then the company will oftentimes charge you a return to sender fee when it's undeliverable,
Yep.
usually at full freight too, not
Yep.
necessarily like at any kind of whatever your discounts are. So very quickly your margin can be
Hmm.
completely eaten up and then some on some of these orders. And so what do you do, right? Because you look at it
Yep.
and you go like, well, if I can offer my product to a much larger audience, you can choose not to ship internationally, but you're leaving a
Hmm.
huge amount of potential business on the table, right?
Yep.
So this is probably, in my opinion, one of the biggest costs of doing business that there are out there.
Yep.
Now, when you look at it as a percentage of all the things, like how often it's going wrong, it's less than 1% of the
It's very
time.
small.
It just
Hmm.
really sucks when it's one time and it's for,
Yep.
200, $300, and you're like, wait, I've got to pony up this dough and maybe I can recoup $100 of it. So
Yep.
for what you're doing, and we start looking at time value analysis and stuff like that for
Hmm.
a $30 bottle of Gloop that didn't cost you
It
that
doesn't
much
make
to
sense.
make, it's not
Hmm.
worth your time, right?
Yep.
But for higher dollar things, it's very much worth your time
Oh
to chase
yeah.
that down.
Hmm.
And we haven't even gotten to talking about the precedent that it sets, where I hate to say it, guys, but if customers find out that they can just contest things in this
Hmm.
Amazon, Costco, Nordstrom world we live in, where the customer is always right and I can game the system, to put it
Yep.
nicely,
Yep.
you're going to deal with a lot of unsavory individuals out there that are going to try to take advantage, and
Yep.
they know that it's not necessarily worth your time. And so you don't want to create a perception of being like you have to fight back on chargebacks a lot of the time.
Hmm.
Now, sometimes
Yep.
it's legitimate, right? I'm gonna say like
Yeah.
it sucks. You didn't get your product, like chargebacks and stuff. A lot of these things favor the customer. Same way in certain states, and like laws favor tenants over landlords. The
Yep.
the perception is that you as the business have more money and more resources to bear, and so that is a cost of doing business. Now, we
Yep.
can talk till we're blue in the face about costs of doing business, because everybody has a different
Hmm.
perception of what really should be the burden of cost on your company.
Hmm.
But this is a big one, right? And a lot of
Yep.
times we're gambling by
Yeah.
doing this shipping, and it is very much a cost of doing business, and you have to, we're talking about getting a thick skin, you have to be able to just let it go. And it stinks because you see that's $200 that you sure wish you had in your pocket to pay
Oh,
yourself,
absolutely.
pay your employees,
Hmm.
have to buy more product and all that stuff. And of course,
Hmm.
no customer generally is going to care about that stuff. Now, we've been lucky enough. We're in a small enough knit community where I would say the vast majority of people, I think, are very well intentioned, are understanding, are
Hmm.
accommodating. We go through these processes. I went through this exact thing this week. There's probably one a month, sadly,
Hmm.
at the volume that we're starting to do now. And
Yep.
and it becomes a real administrative piece that you
Yep.
don't really think about having to staff for or spend time. And it is a painstaking amount of time when you have to call anybody that knows. Try calling UPS, try calling the postal service or whatever. You're gonna spend a lot of time on the phone trying to just get a hold of somebody, and all that stuff.
Yep.
So there's times where it may cost $200-$300 and it's still not worth your time. I
Yep.
hope you achieve that level of success, right? You write
Hmm.
it off as a loss and you move on. Like the big companies
Hmm.
that's why Amazon and Costco and all that stuff, like
Hmm.
they full well know that in the big
Yeah.
scheme of things, like when you're moving stuff at that volume, it's
Yep.
just easier to write off the loss and move on.
Yeah.
And so
Well,
that's
especially when it's not their own money. Amazon specifically, where you have people abusing returns. So that's a whole nother story.
it is, right? Because in that case,
Yeah.
Amazon is acting as basically like a third party, and of course, it's easy for them to just make a customer service
Hmm.
consideration because what do they
Yeah.
care? They're just going to take it
Yeah.
out of your payout,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
We actually got away. We don't really use Amazon a whole lot anymore because the fee structure and their system
Hmm.
has gone way too far the other direction where it just does not favor the seller anymore. And I think a lot of people can, you know, tell us
Hmm.
in the chat, talk about like as these companies grow bigger and bigger and stuff like that. Like this is just kind of the thing. It's not set up to protect the seller a lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, so getting back to the customer service piece, the aspect of trying to make a bad situation better is a lot of times where we find ourselves, here at Gloop. Normally, a customer has ordered something and something hasn't shown up, something hasn't happened, their product has gone bad during shipping, and so how do we take a customer that is frustrated because not only have they spent money, they've waited time, once they get their package it's now not usable.
Right.
And so that's tough, because sometimes for us we have to also weigh. We had a customer, specifically in kind of out west in one of the desert states. He ordered a bottle and it would sit in a USPS truck, probably in the middle of the beating sun out in the desert, and it got too hot and the cap would pop off, and we shipped him a replacement. I think it was up to 3 times, and at some point we just had to say, you know what, we're sorry, we can't get you a bottle, we don't know what's going on. Every
Yeah.
single bottle that we are shipping you, maybe it's sitting on your front porch out in the sun, maybe it's who knows.
Yeah.
So we just write it off and we say, here's your refund, we're really sorry, and we walk away you
Yeah,
know
that just sucks, right? Because it's just
Mhm.
you want to do your and you know we make concessions all the time, to customers, even though we don't necessarily have to. Like it might
Mhm.
not be our fault. Like I was saying, I had one this week where it literally got delivered. There was a UPS. It was the UPS delivered it to the guy's thing, and it was. It sounds like it was a porch pirate situation where he was out of town for a day, came back, it wasn't there. UPS says it delivered. They looked it up, it was geotagged there and stuff like that. And so he keeps contacting me. Well, what do I do? What do I do? I'm like, file a police report. But the
Mhm.
problem is that they're associating the experience with my
Yep.
brand, right?
Yep.
And I'm like, yes, crappy stuff happens all the time, but what's funny about these shippings is the shipping scenarios is when your car gets stolen, nobody calls Honda and goes like, what do I do? It's like
Mhm.
you don't look at the manufacturer of the thing, but
Mhm.
for some reason when it's a shipment to this stuff, there's this expectation that you're going to make the concession as
Mhm.
the company. Why
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
that?
I wish I had the answer. I think it literally comes down to just this mentality where people think that the customer is always right. They think that, it's like, something has happened to me, therefore you have to fix it for me. We have customers, all the time, that they come out and they're it's like they come with guns blazing. They
Oh,
send an email and it's
how
very
dare
angrily
you,
written,
sir?
and
Yes. Oh man.
yeah, it's
Yep.
it,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
so yeah, it's hard, because as a customer I can understand wanting to, like, you're working, your job, you're earning that money, and then you're spending that hard-earned money on products or something of that nature, and then to not get what you spent your money on sucks. And it
It
feels
totally
like, well,
sucks.
hey, like, why should I have to be the one to foot this bill? The company is the big company. The company's bigger than I am. They deal with this all the time. They should be the one to foot the bill.
Right.
So I can't say that that's how most customers think, but I feel
No.
like that there's a component of that.
Chime in the chat if you've seen this, but I'd heard at some point that when people can post ratings on Etsy stores, that they have
Hmm.
a filter now that will not allow like complaints about shipping to
Oh.
show up, because a vast majority of them were negative feedback associated with the shipping experience, which the vendors are saying, well, that's not fair because that's not my fault, right? And so that's not really
Hmm.
indicative. A 1-star experience because your package got stolen off of your thing is not fair to the product. You didn't even get the product to
Yeah.
review it, right? And so
Hmm.
so there's a challenge around the customer perceptions of stuff, and you're dealing with
Sure.
that all the time, and you start getting into resale and all this other stuff. Like, the customer's experience oftentimes is now so disconnected from you.
Hmm.
That's why you see that little note when you go and buy at Home Depot, like, hey, call us first, don't take it back to
Yep.
Home Depot. Home Depot is gonna, whatever, like, they're just gonna take it back and then ask for a credit back, right?
Yep.
And oftentimes it's very simply solved, like, hey, we can just ship you a replacement part or whatever. Like, companies are eager to have that connect because we're
Hmm.
becoming detached. And it's the same thing. Unfortunately, the shipping thing, like I said, the way people's mental process is associating it, they still look at this like Gloop was responsible for getting this thing into my house, to some extent. And
Hmm.
not everybody, guys, I understand that, but
Sure.
it's
Sure.
it's an interesting notion. It's in a big customer service. So we make concessions though, even when it's not our fault. Like, you've done plenty of times where you've just
Hmm.
reshipped just as a
Yep.
customer service piece, and it wins that customer back and all this stuff, and that's a good thing. Unfortunately, I don't have the luxury of doing that on $500 items a lot of the time,
Oh
and
yeah.
so it's like I can
Hmm.
offer a discount. Like, I try to, I try to do what I can, but we
Sure.
have to go through the insurance process, or we have to, like, um
Hmm.
you know fight it to some extent, and it stinks when it escalates to a chargeback, and some I've won and some I've lost, and that's just the name of
Hmm.
the game. Some good commentary in the chat about a lot of courier services now taking photos when they're delivering. I've seen
Hmm.
Amazon do that with some, not all.
Yep.
I
Hmm.
am surprised in this day and age that that is not the geotagging and a photo, especially when a lot of times the photo can have a geotag actually on it as well. It can be a 2 for
Yep.
1
Hmm.
process, is
Yep.
there. And I would say, like, you guys as a consumer too, like, let's take a little bit of responsibility. If you're going to be gone for a week and you're having something that's like high value shipped
Hmm.
to your house, you need to put a hold on that package, or you need to make sure that you are setting a system
Yeah.
up that doesn't tell UPS that it's okay to just leave it, or whoever, you know?
Exactly. Hmm.
Um, but because we have insurance and all this stuff, just people don't care and all this. So again, there's never going to be a
Hmm.
perfect system. But
Yep.
it would be nice if people took a little bit more response, and a lot do. Like, I'll get contacted, like, "Hey, can you hold on shipping this because I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks?" I love that.
Hmm.
Absolutely, we can. Yes, you can pay me now, and
Hmm.
we'll ship it in 2 weeks. Sure, no problem. Um, but
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. Listen, guys,
Yeah.
if you guys have a customer horror story or questions or whatever, and you want to share it, there's the hotline right there. Give us a call and let
Yeah.
us know. I know I was chatting with a couple
You,
of you guys earlier about it.
on a lot of an interesting kind of sidebar here, a lot of things that most small businesses don't realize is that having a terms of service on your website can actually be incredibly critical to determining how you handle customer service issues
Amen.
that come
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
um
Because this is the
in
deal, and
defining this.
you have them say, "I
Hmm.
agree to this." When they check out, nobody reads it, but
Exactly.
that is a CYA for when the
Hmm.
chargeback happens. Here's our return policy.
Yes.
Here's our shipping policy, and all this stuff. Very clear. That's a very good
Hmm.
point.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
must
and
have.
it is, absolutely. If you're on Shopify, I believe they give you some boilerplates. I think Etsy has some boilerplates. Yeah, look into it because it really comes down to just making for sure that you cover all of your bases on some of the most silly thing, right? If you don't have a return policy and you don't explicitly state it, and a customer wants to return it, yeah, sure, you don't. technically have to accept it, but
Yeah.
they might be causing big old stink. And how do you deal with this? So if you have some processes, this really comes in handy for just helping your business flow, especially as you start growing. Because we, as the founders or the owners of the business, right, we're
Mm-hmm.
in a unique position because right now, we're doing all of the customer service.
Yeah.
But at some point, we're going to hand that over to someone. And if we don't have the processes documented,
I'm
how do they know?
this close. No, I'm not this close. I'm close, but yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You have to come up
Hmm.
with a good system, and having done it yourself, you know what to expect and how to set a
Yeah.
good process. Really good question from the chat, if I may. Incendium
Hmm.
87. How do you filter out the shipping problems that are caused by the supplier not packaging the product properly? That is a fantastic
Okay.
question. Thank you for that, Incendium 87. What do you think, Andrew?
So yeah, my first piece would be clarifying. I'm assuming this is going to be, um, let's say I have a reseller of Gloop, and I ship them the Gloop in bulk, and they are packaging it and shipping it to the end customer.
Ooh,
How do
brave.
I determine that they shipped it to the end customer correctly? So actually, this is something that we had to solve early on. We have packaging instructions that we make all of our resellers agree to. If they don't ship it per this specific way,
Yeah.
it's on them,
Yeah.
and we won't cover it because they are not shipping it in a way that we have tested and certified with the Department of Transportation to be safe and to basically be effective at keeping our product stored, or survive through shipping.
Do
Um,
you audit that? Is there how do you know how they're shipping? Like, do you order one
S-
sneakily and see what
So
they're sending?
we have done that in the past.
Yeah.
We'll use kind of just a random name, and we'll go ahead and purchase something and have it shipped to usually a PO box or something of that nature. So they don't know who it is. We haven't done it in a while. That's really one of those luxuries of getting to a certain size. In the beginning, we were very concerned when we started signing up resellers how they would ship products, and so yeah, we would do, every so often we would buy one.
Mm.
But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
now we've kind of solidified, and we have we're actually, as a company as a whole, we're moving towards a what we call a retail packaging that is easier to ship because you could
Yeah.
just throw that in any sort of box. So that's where, as a small business, you probably want to spend some effort and time
Yeah.
in making sure that if you're going to have someone reselling your product, that it's easy for them.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So I would add to that that there's certainly validation that as a seller, when you get to a certain scale, that you want to do drop testing, edge crush testing, there's all that stuff. You can
mhm,
self-certify a lot of that stuff too, um, because that is another top place of finger pointing, right? Where the shipping companies, well, it
mhm,
wasn't protected, but first of all, there is no degree of perfection on packaging. Like, never
yeah,
underestimate UPS's ability to destroy your stuff, or FedEx, or whoever. I'm not trying to pick on UPS.
mhm,
So there is that which is reasonable, and then it's not, you're not going to spend $1,000 on your box trying to make it like Fort Knox, protecting your stuff, because at some point that's why insurance and all that stuff does exist. It sucks, but
mhm,
I don't know if it's 80-20 rule. Like, I would say, hopefully you're capturing at least 80% of the scenarios where, if it's going to get tossed off the edge of the UPS truck or thrown onto our
sure,
porch, or whatever.
mhm,
um it's a process. I mean, it's taken us time. It's taken us time to refine our packaging to a level that we were happy with, where we could and we have the stats on it. You can see
yep,
how
yep,
many claims are being filed as a result and stuff. And so you've seen over time what degree of breakage and issues there are.
yep,
And then from that you can glean, like, how much energy do I need to put into this,
mhm.
is it worth doing a whole packaging overhaul? We got a little ringy dingy on the Maker That Money
Oh
hotline.
boy,
Looks like we got Grant Posner with us. You guys know him as what do we know him as? We know him as 3D Musketeers. Yes, we're gonna bring him
mhm,
on here. We'll see how this goes. We haven't had a caller in a while. I'm gonna unmute you now,
yeah.
Grant. Are you ready? Welcome to Maker That Money, my friend.
Hey guys, how you doing? How you doing?
Oh, you sound great today. Did you?
Well,
What'd you have for breakfast? Are you just
wait a minute. Does
energized?
that mean I sound like crap normally?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, as long as we're honest with each other.
Nothing if not honest. You know that, Grant. You know that.
Hey,
Good to
that's what
have you
it's all
back,
about.
man. You got a story for us? What do you think?
Oh boy, do I.
You got
We
to pick
had
one.
this is one of those cases where our terms of service saved our keister. We had a customer do a chargeback almost 1 year after getting the
Oh, wow.
product.
Wow,
Yeah.
is that legal? Is that legitimate? Because like a lot of companies, like I think PayPal won't let you even initiate a chargeback after 6 months or something like that. I don't know what.
Mhm.
It's probably different for every company.
American Express.
Ah, Amex. All right,
Ah.
all
Yep.
right. So what happened?
He had ordered some custom parts for a very rare convertible. He had broken the OEM part, brought it to us. We
Okay.
reproduced it for him, right? Just reverse engineered it, remade it. And 11 months later, he says, "Well, the part broke. I want my money back." And not only is he asking for just the printed part costs, but the entire design fee. It was about $900 total for this
Oh,
because it
no.
was carbon fiber polycarbonate that we made it out of because if you're gonna make it, you better make it to last. And
Mhm.
Sure.
well, that was a fun one. And boy, he was pissed because he threatened us via email to leave bad Google reviews. And I'm over here sweating you know what off because ultimately we don't have a lot of Google reviews, and one bad one would be astronomically terrible for us.
Mm,
And I say, look, you agreed to our privacy policy, you agreed to our terms of service, and that states very clearly there are no refunds. I'm happy to work with you, and I will make you another part at half cost, but I'm not going to refund all your money. Well, then I'm just going to do a chargeback. Okay,
okay.
fine, do your chargeback. And 93 days after the chargeback, we
Oof.
won.
Wow. 93 days, guys. That's how long it,
93
it, it
days.
can take sometimes.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what was the dollar amount we're talking about here?
Just a hair under 900 is like $874, something like that.
All
So
right.
when you think about how much time, now, and you're gonna hate this question because I know, but like when you think about how much time and energy and sleepless nights and stuff that it created
Oh
for you,
yeah. No, I lost money on that job.
what I was gonna say, what did it end up
Yeah.
costing you? Which is terrible, right? But it's like
Yeah.
we are principled SOBs, and I'll be damned if I'm gonna have somebody try to steamroll me for my
Yeah.
$800, right?
There
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
nothing more dangerous than an entrepreneur who's just felt personally attacked.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and
Because there is not an unfathomable amount of time, energy, or effort that I will put into making sure that
Grant's like,
I
I
get
will
what I worked
burn
for.
this mother to the ground if I have
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mutually assured destruction is
Yeah.
an option.
Yeah. You don't know who you're messing with. So that's the funny thing. I can't tell you how many times you get an unreasonable individual like that, and usually for it to escalate to the
Mhm.
level of it, we're talking about generally unreasonable people here. Usually
Yep.
that are always like, "Do you know who I am? I'm gonna get on my TikTok or whatever." And like, I mean, everybody thinks they've got all this power over you, whether it's Google reviews or whatever. Yeah, I would argue. I don't know. We could have a debate on how detrimental that one negative Google review would be. I understand in percentages wise, like your concern there,
Mhm.
but you really have to work toward taking that threat away. Um,
Mhm.
in our close knit industry, I would say anybody that can really hurt me, I generally have I know, and it would never escalate to this point anyway.
Right. Right.
Right. And
Mhm.
so, that is the number one threat you get. I'm going to flame you online. I'm going to da 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 da
Yep.
da da da. And yet you have to just like, you stand your ground. It sucks, right? Because,
Mhm.
we talked about the great the whole thing where like when you broke down and analyzed how much time you spent and you said like this probably really wasn't worth my time,
Oh no, it wasn't.
but we constantly get like, but I am, my principle. And unfortunately, the
Mhm.
bigger you grow and all that stuff, the more you have to check that and it
Yep.
sucks. It sucks so bad. But
Mm-hmm.
the cost of your emotional well-being is probably the biggest cost when you break it down and
Mhm.
you like, this guy is living rent-free in my head now for the last 90 days because I can't let this thing go. Now, I'm not saying what you did was wrong, but
Mhm.
there come scenarios more and more often where and this is what we were talking about with our thing. You got to grow that thicker skin. And
Without a doubt.
Yep.
I'll be damned if I've figured out how to do that just yet. I mean, I know.
Yep. Same. I mean, this happened almost a year ago, and I'm still pissed off about it.
Yeah, of course. It stays with you, man. It stays with you.
Yep.
And it's weird. It's like, who's taking that kind of baggage home with them on their, regular job? So is this a cost of doing business as well? Probably.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. If you guys have any tips in the chat, that's a great story, Grant, and I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
I'm sure you have plenty more, and we'll have to have you back another time. But my friend, be well. Enjoy your weekend. Thanks for the call.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
All right, later. What a good dude. Like I said, that baggage. I don't know. I don't know what I don't know what the right answer is entirely there. I mean, have you had those moments yourself where you're feeling?
Well, yeah, I was gonna say let's switch it up where instead of we talking about the customers as the business perspective, let's talk about us as being the customer to another business.
Sure, that's a good one.
We had an issue where we went out and we hired a web development company. And you and I have had conversations about this offline. But we went out and we hired a web development company to help us build the next version of our website. And we're talking contracts for tens of thousands of dollars here, and clearly defined deliverables and requirements and everything else laid out at the beginning of a contract. And this is where it kind of crosses an interesting line where we're a customer and we're going to another business, and what they've delivered to us isn't acceptable, and we have to communicate to them that it's not acceptable, and we have to figure out a way in which, again, we can work out a situation where we get something that we feel is acceptable, and they feel that they have delivered something of quality. And sometimes you'll get into these situations where you're miles apart and there is no reconciling anything. And so at what point do you as a customer even determine that it's not worth your time dealing with a bad business? I know this is kind of a different perspective.
No, I like it.
So we had an issue specifically with this company, and we had to determine exactly where, like how much effort that we were going to put into pursuing trying to get money back, or trying to get deliverables met, or again, just feel righted in some way. And it's difficult because as a customer who's spending tens of thousands of dollars on something, this is a significant investment, and it's not something that you're willing to just right away, like what Grant just said. As an entrepreneur, the amount of of energy and effort you're going to put into something just to prove that you were right sometimes isn't the best thing to do, even though it feels like it is, right?
And there's no necessarily right or wrong answer. I think a lot of it goes down to gut feel of what the long-term potential of the relationship is. I mean, that's a really tough one, because as business owners, we know how we want to be treated. So hopefully we're emulating that with the way that we're treating people. And when you come across other businesses that don't do that, you look at that and you're like, is this the person I want to do? And I'll tell you something. After doing this long enough, there is just, you're going to encounter enough people that just have a completely different mentality about what is appropriate in business, how to do business. And unfortunately, there are far too many people out there that have had too much success with poor business ethics. It's just, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's unfortunate, because it's like the good guy doesn't always win, and you're gonna come across these people, and you need to understand, like, do I want to associate with this business? Do I want to waste my time and energy with them?
Yep.
And especially when you get into resellers, you're going to deal with these ones that are going to push and push and push. And they're going to ask for everything they possibly can and credits and all this stuff because they think all's fair in love and business. That is very much a perception. And you
Absolutely.
need to stand up and advocate for yourself a lot of the time. And we
Yep.
don't think about it. I think when we're getting our start, you got to watch for this, guys. If you're starting and you're starting to get to this point, that you want to take every deal you possibly can. And that's not necessarily what's going to be the best for your company in the long term. Sometimes you got to fight back the same way Grant fought back on this thing and say, you know what? I'm not taking this deal. Okay. This isn't right. This isn't fair. I'm not going to be treated this way. I don't treat my customers this way. And you know, you're going to get sometimes it comes to an end. A lot of times you'll be surprised who's coming back and, oh, I'm so sorry. No, we're fine. We're cool. We're cool. What do we need to do? You know, because they just try to find where that line is. Right. And then at that point you need to assess. I'm like, okay, I checked this guy. Now do I want to keep doing this or am I cutting bait? You know,
exactly.
Who knows? Hey, we got another caller. We got another caller. Two in one day. Yeah.
Look at this.
This is certainly not a former Prusa support agent is in the house. This is exciting. Let's find out who this mystery guest can be. Mystery guest, greetings. You are on with Pooch and Andrew of Maker That Money. How are you today? Who is this?
I will hold my name for my own personal safety and career.
Okay. All right. The names will be changed to protect the innocent. Well, do you have a story or a question or a comment for us?
I have a story and a, I guess, comment/suggestion for those who are in the customer support field that could be of use.
We would love to hear that. Hit us.
All right. So way back when I was working for a particular company in the 3D printing field, where a certain other, well, let's just say, all right, 3D printers were out in various markets. So I would always get calls or actually chat requests from people who own clone copies of printers.
And so, it wasn't even your product.
Yeah, that's fine. So, sorry, they would get on chat and they would want us to help them. And I would explain, like, look, I really can't because I only work with our machines and I know what's in there and what they do and everything else. For the other machines, I don't know the parts. And for the most part, if you just sit there and explain it to them and even help them out a little bit and find the manufacturer, find their support service and forward that to them, the majority of them are very, very, happy with that and everything else. And they're happy that you explained it. Right?
Sure.
But I had 2 cases of the same response.
Oh, boy.
So I went through it, the whole thing, and I'm like, look, this isn't our printer. Here's the people that you need to contact. Here's, their website. Here's their email, whatever I could find for them.
Okay.
So the person came back. It's like, well, if you don't help me, I'm going to call the cops.
I'm gonna call the cops.
They're gonna call the cops.
What?
So I'm like,
what are the cops gonna do?
There, and I'm like, okay, I know it's late. I'm not sleepy. I'm not dreaming, and I'm reading that right. And I'm like, excuse me.
Wait, which
like,
cops? The Czech cops or their local cops? Like, which cops are they calling? Who knows?
The first time I didn't ask.
Yeah.
And I'm like, excuse me, like, well, you're refusing to provide service for your product. Like, but I just showed you that it's not our product. It's like, oh, this is ridiculous. I'm going to give you such a bad review. I'm like, okay, if you want, go right ahead. There's nothing I can do. Just so you know, everything is saved. So this chat is
we have the
saved.
Receipts. Yeah.
And they're just like, they hung up. So then, like 2 weeks later, the same exact situation. I'm like, no, someone's messing with me.
Was it the same guy? It must have been the same guy.
No, it wasn't. Because I went back and I found the exact same chat and everything else. And it was 2 completely different locations. The whole works.
Oh, no.
And so this time I'm like, oh, okay. I go, look, I'm in the Czech Republic. So if you're going to call the cops, you have to call the local police, okay? And for you, that's going to be a long-distance call. I will 3-way it for you, okay? So I'll call the cops for you. You can tell them, but you have to let me save the conversation because it's going to be a riot. And same type of thing. They're like, curse me out, and they hung up the phone and everything else. But it was just so strange. I never ever experienced like, I'm going to call the cops if you don't do your job.
Does that work in some countries?
don't
I
think
wonder.
so.
Like,
Yeah,
there are cops.
is at work.
There are cops like working in shifts on these claims of lack of service. There's a whole division of the police force that just
The customer
handles
service police.
customer service police. That is funny, mystery caller. I can't say I've experienced anybody threatening calling the cops for me, but you did spark a little thought in me, and that was, I would be curious what your guys' thoughts are on, in order to leave a review, what if you had to post a serial number that was, or something that was like validating that this
Ooh.
person actually purchased an authentic thing? Like, is there a way, is this somewhere that the blockchain technology could potentially help us, where there's like a ledger
Oh
of
gosh,
of
Pooch over here talking about blockchain.
I don't know. I'm just thinking, like, if there's like a public ledger of like, these are legitimate serial numbers that are issued or whatever, and it can be very clearly determined, like, yes, this person has one, and I don't know. This is probably just completely overkill, but you understand my point.
But I mean, yeah, I understand your point. I mean, there's ways that you normally, we would sit there like, all right, take a photo of the serial number, we would match it up and everything. Granted, photos could be altered and everything else, but if it doesn't match up, then we have to investigate it further, and the customer's going to be put on hold, not for like a few hours, but for like a few days, until we can figure it out.
Yeah.
Because there's always people trying to get a fast one over it. And it's like you said, you try to figure out, it's the cost of actually fighting something versus the cost of the actual goods you're trying to recover. What's the worth, which is worth more.
Yeah. Well, you also bring up a good point about the authenticity of product, right? Because your company certainly isn't the only one that I'm sure deals with clone product and stuff. I've had conversations with E3D in a similar vein, where the management team was complaining that, like, we're so nice that if somebody called and was complaining about some issue with a nozzle or something, even if it wasn't ours, we would probably, if they called and asked for like a restaurant recommendation in their area, they would probably like answer, right? And we're like, it's actually becoming kind of taxing on our system, our support system and stuff like that. So it is an interesting thing. I'd also heard a rumor, I want to validate with you while I got you on the line, that a lot of the I'd heard at one point that like the extruder motor, like, I don't know if you're familiar with this type of 3D printer, but there's a printer called the Prusa Mark III, and there's an extruder motor on the front of it that's got, it's screened and it says genuine Prusa, whatever on it. And I had heard that a lot of the badging that's on the printer itself and on a lot of its parts are a means to allow authenticity to be established because of how many people are using, non-standard parts and where liabilities might lie in the case of. Can you confirm or deny that?
I can neither confirm nor deny that.
But it is an interesting technique to obviously put on your equipment if you have a product that people clone. So, listen, caller. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, wait, one little tip for anyone who's in customer service, right? You're talking about getting a thick skin.
Yeah, grow a thick
Oh
skin.
yes.
1989, the movie Roadhouse, when Patrick Swayze is, talking to all the bouncers in there.
Yeah.
And he's going through like, this whole thing of like, what if this happens? He's like, be nice. What if this happens? Be nice. That is the best advice possible for anyone who's doing customer support work, is to watch that scene at least once a week. Because no matter what they're saying to you, it's just words. That's it.
Yeah, it's just words. That's a great pro tip. Listen, caller, thank you so much for spending the time to share that with us. It's really good to hear your voice, and I hope we hear you again on another one soon, my friend.
Thank you, guys.
Be well. Take care.
Ciao.
Wow. So be nice. Let's
Be nice.
try to wrap on that because listen, the last thing that anybody wants to do when somebody is just being a complete a-hole to you is to just turn around and be nice. But the whole notion
Yep.
of killing people with kindness, de-escalating the situation, and a lot of times there is a lot of opportunity, guys, here to win customers over for life. You'd be surprised. Little bit of concession, even if you're not in the wrong, even if it's not your fault, what that will do in terms of flipping the
Yep.
script and having them out. I can't tell you how many times I've had people come at me guns blazing, and I was nice and I heard them out, and they were just 9 times out of 10, that's all they're looking for. They just want to feel heard. You address it.
Yep.
You know, again, maybe you make some concessions even though you don't need to in the name of customer service, and they'll flip around and immediately be like, I had a great
Yep.
experience, and then they're advocating for you and like all this stuff. It's an incredible 180, and it's a very satisfying
It's amazing.
feeling when you get that, because it's just like, I was ready to tell this guy to just you know, I wanted to do that, and you cannot do that. Even if you have every right in the world, you cannot do that. Be nice
Yep.
is fantastic advice.
Yeah.
And growing that thick skin, learning to do that, because it can change, and it is just words, and you're trying to appreciate where people are coming from, and yeah, you know, they're spending their hard earned, and you know, they don't want to feel like they're not getting their value out of it. I always look at it as people get 3 strikes, and sometimes 3 is even generous, but it's like always like, I'm so sorry that happened. I hear you. We acknowledge. You know, whatever try to address the situation. And this is hard because a lot of times people, you don't like, I think we as humans have a tendency to shy away from confrontation a lot of the time. And so there are a lot of people that are just like, I'm just going to ignore this because it's uncomfortable, and you can't do that. You have to, that's part of the thick skin. You have to be able to address the conversations that are uncomfortable as much as you want. And that might sound like a duh to a lot of you, but you'd be surprised how much of a challenge that is for a lot of people. So always respond. I've said it before. Always respond. Always be polite. I'm so sorry that happened. Then you give them a chance. Like a lot of times that'll be it right there. Like, oh my God, you responded. Thank you so much. They just felt heard. And then they'll work with you. And then the kind of the tone changes, right? Because a lot of times people, they're just like assuming, they're just shouting into the ether that nobody's listening to them and all that stuff. So you'd be surprised how far you'll get with just the one kind response. Okay. Then if they are still being abusive, then you escalate to a point where like, I am trying to help you. Like, I'm willing to do that, but like, you call them on it. You're like, I need you to be polite. Like, we're doing the best we can. We are just, you know, blah, blah, blah. A lot of times I'll set some context at that point in the conversation. Listen, man, we're a small business. We make mistakes. I understand. It just depends on what the scenario is and all that stuff. But you know, you try to set the tone. But if we can't keep this civil, we're not going to be able to work together. And then if they're still doing it, then it's block city. And, you know, there are tools for that and stuff where it's like, yes, you can block their email, you can block their IP, you can ban them from the store, you can do all kinds of stuff. And they probably will leave a bad review and all that stuff. But, you know, monitor your reviews. Like, you should always respond to those as well when you can. And I think that's a great discussion for another time too, how to manage reviews when it's valuable, when it's not, how to address that stuff. That's all good. Oh my gosh, we covered a lot of ground, and even still probably not nearly enough. Do you have any like last minute pointers on what you've done to develop a thicker skin in this whole game? Is it just experience and time and energy and just getting that leathery skin from being out in the sun? Basically,
I think it's
sun is,
I think you have to I think you have to just kind of go through it in order to build up those calluses. You know, you have to actually put in the work to build calluses. They're not just gonna, you know, build on their own. You gotta, you know, get yourself dirty too.
Gotta get in the trenches.
You know, really, you know, you just kind of have to work through it. There are still plenty of times where you know, something will get to me and it'll bug me and it'll be frustrating. But you know, I've really tried to do better just letting things go and just letting them be, and understanding that it, you know, if it's not worth my time, it's not worth my time thinking about it anymore either. So it's time to move on.
I like to say this real estate right here is the most precious that you have, and when you're giving people free rent up there, you're giving away a lot more than you realize. So, you know, that's just something something to keep in mind. And I listen, guys, I'm not perfect at it. I struggle with it just like everybody else. A couple of other things that I would add that have been, I think I've said it before, but I love it. This is something a good friend of mine, a mentor that owned a company back in the 90s, told me. He's like, as a small business owner, you have to learn love the taste of your own blood. You're going to get smacked in the mouth. It's not going to be your fault a lot of the time. And, what I add to that is like, it's all about getting to tomorrow. You're going to have the bad days. You need to just, whatever, allow yourself the bad day. That's fine. Sleep it off, get to tomorrow, have a different perspective, and you'll 9 times out of 10 you're going to feel better the next day and the day after that or whatever. You get to keep getting to tomorrow when these things get you down, and get those people out of your freaking head, because it's just you need that space for so much more stuff when you're building a company. All right, guys. This was a fun one. We're already a little bit over time, but there's just a lot of tasty nuggets in this topic, and we'll have to have.
We had a couple callers. That was
we had
awesome.
A couple callers. I love the story time, guys. It's great. I think I give us feedback. I hope this kind of experience is good. Please, if you're enjoying these conversations, like, subscribe, recommend, call in. Support it. We have a lot of fun doing it. I've always said I would do it if nobody watched, but it's so much more enjoyable when we get you guys interaction in there. Thank you so much to Grant and not anybody from Prusa for calling in and sharing their stories. And we will catch you next Friday, 9 a.m., same bat time, same bat channel, 9 a.m. Pacific, right here on the YouTubes for the next Maker That Money. Till then. Happy weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.